Have you ever stopped to think that George's days might be numbered?
What?
I know it sounds like an exaggeration, but Evie Pig showed up to change everyone's lives. Ever since Evie appeared in the story, many people started to think that George would end up losing the space he always had in the show. And apparently, those fans might be right. His fate seems to be that of a forgotten character, maybe even left behind for good. But where does this theory come from? Well, Peppa Pig has been on the air for many years, and ever since Bluey's success showed how much audiences love seeing stories about two sisters, Peppa's creators might have realized that this kind of relationship attracts more attention. That's why a lot of people believe the future of the series will revolve around Peppa's adventures with Evie, leaving George a bit on the sidelines. He might even spend some time feeling left out, trying to find his own place in the family. And there are some who take it even further, saying this could cause fights between the siblings, or even lead the writers to create a new baby, this time a little boy, to balance things out. That would be pretty unfair, don't you think? Just imagine making George go through all that just for being the only boy in the family, only to then bring in another boy to go through the same thing. Or maybe this new brother could become his best friend, saving George from that sad future. But will George really change that much in the coming years? Grab your popcorn, because the mystery is just getting started. Come with me, because Zigzag is on air. What if George finds out he isn't really Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig's son? Ever since Evie was born, many people started to believe that Mummy Pig can only have daughters. And that's why George might have come from another family. According to the theory, he was adopted to be Peppa's brother, and that would even explain why his parents always treat him with so much affection. In George's birthday episode, for example, they closed the museum just for him, and even buy a huge trampoline. It almost feels like they're trying to make up for something, doesn't it? But what disproves all of this is the episode The Olden Days, where Mummy Pig appears pregnant with George. Except there's one detail that completely changes the meaning of that scene. There's a theory that everything in the show is actually a fake program recorded by Miss Rabbit. And what if even that pregnancy was part of the script? Don't believe me? Well, let me show you. Now, there's a pretty dark theory that's been scaring Peppa Pig fans lately. It says that George might lose his entire family in a terrible accident. Calm down. There's no real proof of that yet. But the details that fans have been noticing are really strange. Have you ever realized that almost every pig in the show is somehow related to Peppa? Yeah. According to this theory, whenever the number of pigs in the town gets too high, something grim happens to balance things out. And the reason would be just one: they eat too much. Remember when Peppa almost devoured all the cheese at the restaurant in the diner episode? That girl is basically a bottomless pit of fat. And George, being the most fragile one in the family, might end up as the only survivor. And that's where Miss Rabbit comes in. Dude, she's always been watching them. In the episode George's New Clothes, mud stains the lens of a camera when the family jumps in the dirt. And later, in TV Land, we find out that the one controlling those cameras is actually her, meaning Miss Rabbit has been watching the pig family the whole time. And if this theory is true, she might be the one who decides the terrible fate of George's family. Do you want to stop this horrible future from happening? Then send the hashtag George so the Rabbit Studio can find out. Have you ever noticed that Peppa and George study in the same class? Yeah, that's one of the strangest details in the series. After all, Peppa is 4 years old, while George is only 2. According to a theory that's been gaining traction among fans, George will end up being forced to leave school to make room for his new sister, Evie. And the reason is pretty simple. There's just not enough space for everyone in Miss Rabbit's script. That means George might have to drop out of class and even distance himself from his friends. Sounds like an exaggeration? Then think about this. Why don't Zoe Zebra's younger sisters study in the same classroom as the other characters? In the episode Gerald Giraffe, you can see that the only younger siblings who study with Madame Gazelle are George Pig, Edmund Elephant, and Richard Rabbit. Zoe's sisters are left out. In other words, there seems to be a sort of limit in the class, and the teacher doesn't accept more than 2 little ones from the same family. And if that pattern continues, George might end up being the next one to leave. And here comes the big question. If Evie wasn't created to take his place, then why was she added to the show at all? The answer might be simpler and sadder than it seems. She was created to replace George. But what about the future? What would become of him? This is one of the saddest things. Take a look. The chance of him becoming an archaeologist is pretty high, you know. In the episode where he and Peppa are playing in their grandparents' backyard, the little pig finds a dinosaur bone that ends up being displayed in the museum. Not bad for a 2-year-old boy, right? That shows that, besides loving dinosaurs, George has a talent for discovering important things that are hidden. But the sad part of this story is that, if he really follows that career, it will be in honor of Grandpa Pig, who probably won't be around anymore. But hold on, because now comes the strangest part. In the episode The Future, George appears dressed as a dinosaur. Yes, he doesn't just study fossils, he becomes one. And that's when the theory gets even crazier. After all the tragedies his family went through, George would have grown up so traumatized that he decided to live in costume forever. Basically, he turns into one of those weird adults who dress up as animals. In other words, George's fate is so dark that the poor little pig went from being a cute main character to a background figure at a strange convention. No one will want to get close to him, and he'll remain alone, hugging his own T-Rex costume. Sad? A little, but let's be honest, it was the most predictable future possible. Remember the episode where George makes friends with a spider? Well, it turns out that one of the theories says his best and only friend could actually be his greatest enemy. They say that George, as an adult, would be bitten by a poisonous spider that was hiding inside the dinosaur costume he wears all the time. Yes, the same outfit he never takes off since he became a traumatized weirdo. And that's exactly why many fans believe that episode might be a disguised warning. If you spend your whole life hiding inside a costume to escape your problems, eventually something's going to bite you. Literally. Could that be George's end? Or will the show still give him one last chance to change his own fate? That we'll only find out in the next season. And you can stay up to date, not with the dinosaur suit, but with everything that happens in this cartoon. Just click the subscribe button and learn how not to turn into a weirdo like George. George will never find a great love. Yeah, it sounds exaggerated, but it actually makes sense within the show's universe. After all, as we've said before, all the pigs in the story are related to Peppa and George. So if George ever wants to get married one day, it's going to be complicated. But the problem goes beyond that. George has always had a closer relationship with dinosaurs than with people. And as we also mentioned earlier, in the episode The Future, he appears dressed as a dinosaur as if that were totally normal. In other words, even as an adult, he keeps the same weird behavior he had as a child. The theory says that because of that, George might end up being alone forever. It's kind of cruel, right? But who knows? Maybe fate will surprise us, and one day he'll meet a little pig who also loves dinosaurs. Warm and bittersweet. Then yes, his future could change, and maybe, for the first time, George wouldn't end the story alone.